Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, depending on the time you are listening to this conversation. I'm here with Suay Aksoy, who has been among many different responsibilities and experiences, the president of the International Council of Museums between 2016 and 2020. And she's also been the chair of the ICOM Advisory Committee from 2013 to 2016, and the chair of the International Council for City Museums within the same big organization, International Council of Museums, or ICOM. Probably the largest professional association in the field of museums, with over more than 45,000 members, if I'm not wrong, worldwide. Thank you, Suay, for joining us in this conversation that will have the topic of the future of museums as the main subject, in which we would be happy to have your insight and your experience and ideas.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to participate in this conversation with you, Bartomeu. Thank you very much.
One of the main interests also in having Suay with us, among the different reasons that through the conversation will certainly appear, is that as early as 2015, Suay Aksoy initiated the proposal for a new definition of museums within ICOM. And I will read in a moment the definition that was proposed, and it was due to be voted in 2019. But I wanted to ask before, what was the motivation that impulsed you to propose a new definition of museums?
Actually, it's ironic that there was a definition that has been voted in Kyoto in 2019, and it wasn't accepted. Because when I look back to our International Museum Day themes, they have just this reference, the very same reference as the new definition, which we will talk about later. So the motivation was that, not only I myself, but also my colleagues have noticed that the current definition did not really meet the requirements of the day. So the museums have changed, the paradigm has really shifted for museums. So there was a talk of the paradigm shift for years, but it has lately become more pronounced in the discussions pertaining to the museums. And what was this? This was the enlargement of the role, the social role of museums. And in 2015, as you will remember also, UNESCO had a decision on the role of the social role of museums and its impact on diversity, inclusion. So it was, everywhere. I wasn't a whiz to discover this. It was everywhere. And I thought it was time that we start. I had the advantage, of course, of being the chair of the advisory council, so that I could take the initiative and invite people to discuss this at our annual meeting. So that's how it started. I mean, it was obvious since the even 70s, but since 80s, I think the social role of museums have really gained a big importance, priority, aside from their basic functions, of course.
Yes, we will come back to this idea. I would like to read the proposed new definition for those of our those members of our audiences who are not familiar with that debate, and the definition proposed read as follows: museums are democratizing, inclusive and polyphonic spaces for critical dialogue about the past and the futures, acknowledging and addressing the conflicts and challenges of the present. They hold artifacts and specimens in trust for society, safeguard diverse memories for future generations, and guarantee equal rights and equal access to heritage for all people. Museums are not for profit. They are participatory and transparent, and work in active partnership with and for diverse communities to collect, preserve, research, interpret, exhibit, and enhance understandings of the world, aiming to contribute to human dignity and social justice, global equality, and planetary well-being. It is, I've read that among those who did not agree or were not enthusiastic about this new definition, they missed the idea or the explicit mention that museums are educative institutions, so they are, let's say, mainly an educational tool, or that, among other items, that it was not clear enough that museums were based around collections. I thought as well that the proposed definition was focusing very much, or much more than traditionally, on those not those things that are in the museum, but those people to whom the museum serves. Is that the way that it was conceived?
Partly yes, partly no. I personally also looked for a term for education or learning, I must say that. But as far as collections are concerned, I think it is quite clear here that it is, it says here for communities to collect, preserve, research. I think collections or collect is there. There was one thing that some people were quite questioning about. It was saying it is a space, not an institution, not a building, it's a space. Mm-hmm. But Bartomeu, look at it now. It is only a space during the pandemic. It is just a space, a virtual space. And, whether with the pandemic or without the pandemic, the direction that we are moving in is virtual. I mean, virtual will be in our lives, of course, with the collections, with the physical things, but museums should be able to exist in the virtual world as well. So space is both physical and virtual. So, and at times of crisis, like the pandemic now, we just settle down for the virtual space. So I think the definition is quite far-sighted, and I wouldn't really accept a criticism of space with everything that we are living through now. Education, I would prefer, yes, to have something, not education maybe, but learning would be my preference as a term. All the primary functions of the museum are listed here.
There is
like the collection, preservation, research, interpretation, exhibition, they are all listed here. But as you said, there is a weight on the part of the social mission of the museum, which was probably, well, this was not made up, from the blue sky. There was a survey, and they received some 260 something suggestions, proposals, definition suggestions. And this is what came out of it. So a lot of people in the world do need something like this to say to others that museums are relevant. Let me tell you this. It is changing. Life is changing, and you know it better than I do. Can you imagine a time when migrants' distress, Trump's rise or fall, violence on the streets, just name it, rise of populism or nationalism in Europe, in European countries, the vote for Brexit, hashtag Me Too movement, they have been in our lives so immediate and so intensely, thanks to digital technologies and social media. So how can museums not touch our lives like this? They have to. Otherwise, we are, we are somewhere else. So things have changed. Things have come into our houses, and we are aware of anything that happens in the world, and the museums have to say something about it as well.
Among the colleagues and I am coming from the field of modern and contemporary art, among the colleagues, I would say from anywhere in the world, there is we debate often about one of the major challenges that museums face today, and you just mentioned the word a few seconds ago, that one of the many challenges that we have identified is that of becoming irrelevant to societies. I know very well that how museums of art have been, in certain cases, accused of a certain elitism and only, let's say, being directed towards a few chosen ones. Of course, that is it cannot be generalized anywhere, but when societies changed so much, and we can name afterwards some of these very tangible demonstrations of change, museums seemed to have remained, seems not to have changed or adapted. And we use we quote often the proposed new definition as one of the signs that we're saying museums adapt to the new expectations or die. Was it really, or do you share this
This
philosophy?
is quite abrupt, and when you say adapt or die, but a very renowned colleague just a couple of weeks ago in a conversation, in a conversation like this, in fact, said something. He said, during the pandemic, museums were the first to be closed down and last to be opened. So we need to ask the question, are museums so necessary?
Mm-hmm.
Because others may ask this question. And this was something really which bugged my mind in the last days very much. And yes, we have to be relevant. We need to be relevant. And this adaptation is not only for the expectation of our audiences, but also we have to adapt ourselves to the new conditions of the world, to the climate crisis, the climate change, to the economic crisis that we go through. We think it's ended, but it comes back again, and it is a continuous crisis. Actually, it's not. It has not been gone. It has not gone away since 2008 or maybe even 2001. So there are many things that as museums we need to adapt, and we also need to help our audiences adapt, because there are surveys that are done every year in the States. And according to their results, museums are considered among the most trustable and revered institutions in the world. Mm-hmm. They come before media, and they come before armies. So they are really trusted. So we are known for delivering unbiased information. Mm-hmm. So that's very important through our exhibitions and through our learning programs. But do we provide people with multiple perspectives on the past and on the present developments? This is quite important because we are giving them the information. And, previously we were talking about a history, but today we say histories, because we know there are different angles looking at the same thing, which is the case. So do we build, as museums, platforms or forums, I should say, that invite people to tell these stories and hear these stories? This is very important, a very important role for social cohesion, just thinking of it. So can we bring all these people, all these ideas to create a better tomorrow, a better future for them? So through these plural stories, I think museums can really bridge communities locally, regionally, and globally, of course, nationally and globally, I should say, and repair the social fault lines that we have and create harmony. So in this sense, if they collaborate and contribute to this kind of social cohesion, they will be democratizing the society as well. So this is what is happening, and this is what is actually meant in the definition, I would think.
Yes, that's very clear. And one of the signs of the very fast changes that we have lived maybe within at least 1 year is that while I kind of grew up with the idea that museums are or have to be a sort of neutral space, Museums as institutions should not take positions within the ideological landscape that surrounds us. Nowadays, it is more and more accepted that about a number of issues, museums must not remain neutral. They have to take part, and also some even defend the opinion that museums should lead transformation. There are several areas in which this is happening very fast. One is the debate about restitution that is taking place in mainly in Central Europe, Germany, France, the UK. The other area in which deep change has occurred very fastly is in the ethics that apply to the behavior of museum professionals. I have followed the cases of curators and directors who have resigned or have been invited to resign because of statements or certain behaviors that probably they had been going on for a very long time, and until now they didn't have those consequences. And also, I believe the rise of populisms that is quite generalized, not only in Europe, but also in America and in other places in Asia. It's bringing the museum, it's showing how fragile as well the museum as institution is. But how do you see this idea of the museum being a decisive actor for change, the museum as activist? Is that really possible?
Well, I don't really see museums as activists. I don't. But I believe museums are not neutral places. They have never been neutral. I mean, just think of the, I'm thinking of museums in Venice, for example. There are museums telling about the 16th century or 17th century, and they talk about the Venetian wars against the Ottomans. Mm-hmm. And of course, the museums here in Istanbul, they talk about the same thing too. Mm-hmm. And here, of course, it's the victory of the Ottomans that is being exhibited, and in Venice, it is the glory of Venice, Venetians against the Ottomans. So there is, I mean, this is, of course, very gross, the example, but just think of the world wars and how they were interpreted before and how they are interpreted now. So museums are have never been neutral. They have always, either by their silence mm-hmm. or with what they say, they have a stance which is not neutral. And nowadays, because of this incredible communication, this social media and everything, we are exposed to so much information that we do talk about things more openly. Mm-hmm. And that's why this ethics issue comes up as well. You know, previously nobody would talk about things like, a racist statement towards a staff member or towards the history of a certain community. But today they talk, and because of this, people are asked to resign, or they do mm-hmm. resign. And yeah, so it is a different era with so much communication and openly going around.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and within all those signs of very fast change in the societies that surround museums, have you seen interesting signs of museums adapting and moving very quickly in the right direction? You are certainly an observer with global perspective, and I'm curious to see what has attracted your attention in the way museums anywhere in the world have particularly adapted or approached this fast changing condition. If any, you could.
There are museums. Which are really adapting quite fast to the demands of climate change. I mean, there are museums. You know, it's very interesting. Now, I'm thinking of Louvre. Louvre has just decided to spread its collections to the other museums in France during the time when they will have some renovations in the museum. So, and it's a big number of pieces from its collections, and very important pieces. This would have never happened before, but it is happening now. So Louvre wants to put away some of its things, allow people to see them, share it with a greater audience. And of course, this is also it is not de-accessioning, but it is giving it away, and it is a way of really, I think it is a way of thinking of the carbon footprint, the preservation, the conservation processes in the museum. So yes, things are changing quite fast, and I'll tell you something. It was maybe beginning of 90s that I saw this exhibition on climate change in New York at the New York City Museum. It's quite early. I mean, museums can really act quite fast compared to the universities, for example. The museums tend and have always made temporary exhibitions to talk about controversial things, to talk about things that develop in society. Immediately they can do this. Until such things get into the university, into the curriculum, of course they can get into the university, into the curriculum, it takes time. But the museums, not with their permanent exhibitions, but with their activities, workshops, and their temporary exhibitions, they can say a lot of things, and they have been doing this. And now today, of course, much more than before. Sure.
I would like to ask you more about the notion of the city museum, because you are, in fact, this is the field where you come from. Yes. in the museum practice, and you just mentioned an idea that it's for the subject of our conversation is important, is the capacity of city museums to react very fast to things that are of, let's say, concern or common concern for a community, right? Yes. What are the strengths of that type of museums?
Yeah. City museums, I like them very much because they are so dynamic compared to other museums. City museums usually cover something like, of course, you can have, like in Barcelona, you can even have archaeology in your museum, but that's not the point that I want to bring forward. City museums are usually social history museums. They tell about the life of ordinary people, not the life of the king or the dukes and lords, like the national museums. City museums are people's museums. So they talk about the social life, and they have done this even before social media has invaded our privacy so much. So it is a part of their life, of the city museums. So because they are interested in social history, they do a lot of oral history, which allows them to get material information from the source directly. They do oral history with anybody on the street. If there is a regeneration project going on somewhere in any of the cities, they go and talk with the communities there, see whether they are happy with it or not, what kind of issues they have, and how they are affected by the more global problems or issues like climate change, which is so pertinent now to all our to all lanes of life, actually. Mm-hmm. So, and city museums, because they are so close to they can be so close to the citizens, can have an impact, a much more forceful or strong impact on the governors, on the governing of the city. So it is a part of city museums' life that they talk on behalf of the people who tell them things concerning their life and what they expect from the city, what kind of a tomorrow, what kind of a future for their city they contemplate, they think. So I think the life of this city museums is much more dynamic and much more impactful as far as change is concerned, as far as social change is concerned. Mm-hmm. That's the interesting thing about city museums. So you see a lot of things appear much earlier in the city museums. And also they use technology a lot easier than the others probably. Now a lot of city museums have Google Maps on their walls or on their floors where you can see everything, spot everything, not only demographics, but also social demographics, what's happening with their people, mm-hmm. and what happened in history and what happens today.
Yes,
Bartomeu, I have to say this. I have a great admiration for art, maybe more than art museums, for art biennales or art fairs, where things are much more dynamic than in museums. Mm-hmm. Anyway, yes. I mean, compared to any museum, not only art museums, but even compared to city museums or whatever. In these art festivals, they really tackle issues right away, immediately, and mm-hmm. they create forums for people to talk about and think about.
I was going precisely to bring up the comparison with the art institutions because a lot of the a large number of the things art museums do depends on preparation, on long-term preparation, depends on historicist expertise, so to say, and depends on a very basic idea that it is the world will be regular, will be constant. This has suddenly changed. Nobody knows when the next exhibition will take place. And also related to something you mentioned a couple of times already, which is climate change. There is a new notion that is becoming central in our debates, and it is that the model on which museums have been operating, and I talk now about art museums, mostly centered around the idea of a blockbuster exhibition, attracting crowds and lots of people, and mainly tourists, because the most visited museums in the world attract, let's say, a large portion of their audience is tourists. And all that model is in light of the planet warming. It's no longer sustainable. If we have to be sensitive to what the experts in climate change are telling us, we either change our behaviors and therefore fly less, transport less, eat less meat, and a number of other recommendations that I'm not going to try to recall right now, but that's a really vast number of changes in our behavior. If we don't adapt in these ways, we are facing extinction as a species, and we are not the only ones. I mean, it's the human species will not be the only one to extinguish in the case of environmental collapse. How would you imagine the future of museums in regard to these needs for change? I know it's a big question. This is a huge. We could spend probably not the rest of the day, but most of the rest of our lives thinking about it. And it's not the idea right now. But how do you see this very, very poignant and deep challenge?
Actually, this is a big challenge, that's for sure. But I must say, it has been the big museums that have organized the box office or blockbuster exhibitions, and people went to them. But, maybe people from London to Paris, maybe to Barcelona, to Berlin, but, they don't usually go to, let's say, Sweden, leave alone Turkey, or, for a blockbuster exhibition or anything. I think people do not travel in order to see a museum. They travel, and wherever they go, they visit the museum, if there is a museum visited. This is generally speaking, because there are, I don't know how many thousands of museums in the world, and the blockbusters are really exclusive to a small number of museums compared to this big number. But what I see is going to happen are among others, two trends. First, museums, if they are indoors, a portion of them will be virtual. rather than going to the museum, people may settle for having a virtual tour. And with the virtual tours, of course, there has to be something, extra. So expertise will be very important, I think, in that case, who tells you or who takes you to the tour and so on, and what kind of information you get sitting home and watching online an exhibition. This will continue, I guess, regardless of the museums doing their exhibitions or whatever. And secondly, outdoors is gaining more and more importance. So I think people will be going to sites, and museums will probably gain some more importance. They have been overshadowed by the physical site, and we don't talk about the site museums, but we talk about the sites. So what I'm saying is that it has been the area of ICOMOS, for example, monuments and sites, whereas we know that there are museums over there. So I always think of museum visits, especially if they are not in big cities, as a part of another package, a package of things, traveling, maybe trekking with outdoor, and unless it's in the big city, one would not really take a plane and go to a museum, to see a museum. There will be less traveling anyway. Of course, everybody has to care about what's happening to our world. So, of course, the plane tickets will be much more expensive. People will become more aware of staying in hotels, whatever. But there will be more regional or local visits, and there will be more a tendency for outdoor activities, including what the museums can provide. But in the cities, of course, the big museums, they will, for a while, continue their exhibitions as before. I don't think it will end very quickly or very soon. But probably it will be more domestic people coming in rather than foreigners traveling around. You wouldn't go to, it will be less people going to New York from Europe to see an exhibition, I guess, to visit a museum. But if you are already in New York, you will go there. Otherwise, I think it has to be a package. Tourism and museums, tourism and culture, let's say, they have to really find a midway that will be acceptable for the conditions that are now overwhelming our world.
Sure. If within the, let's say, until the pandemic was declared, tourism, or what some call the experience economy, was the framework in which many museums, the big ones in the big Western capitals, were located. Most of them, not only in the United States, where there is no public or not as much public funding as there is in Europe. The experience economy was the fuel on which those institutions were functioning. Now, if the experience economy in the form of tourism, it's going to shrink, what do you think would be the alternative economy that could fill that gap that tourism and the experience economy will create by diminishing? Do you think education could fill that gap, or is there any other way
well,
to look at it?
Let's not say education. Yes, I think it is in the advantage of museums to collaborate with universities. I think it's very important that we need. It's both ways. The museums need universities in order to, in order to benefit from their knowledge of, let's say, technologies, the digital technology and other technologies that they are quite superior in. But the universities can also benefit from the experience of the museums because, as I said before, it is easier for museums to gather information and exhibit it, expose it to the public. So I think some kind of and the museums have so much material in their under their hands, in their storages, in their windows and everywhere. So much material, so much documentation and everything. So this can be really, how shall I say, upgraded by collaboration with the university, with academia, and presented to the lay people, to normal people, for their learning. And this does not have to be, it should not be a formal learning, because museums, the advantage of museums is that they are not formal education institutions. Sure. So they have this freedom and still they provide unbiased information. But so this can be something.
Probably one of the many things that this pandemic has shown to all of us is the fact that we have entered a time of permanent learning. Everybody is learning all the time something, whether it is officially recognized with a degree at the end or not, it doesn't matter. And we are all trying to also adapt by constantly learning abilities, skills, information, language, and so on.
It is the learning age, actually, yes?
Yes.
It is the learning age, and yes, we want to learn more and understand more.
And we need to, in order to continue being productive and useful for our communities. We have been warned that we are approaching the end of this conversation, and I would like to ask just one single question that sounds a bit like, or I think a little bit in terms of science fiction to begin with, but hopefully not at the end. If museums have to adapt and transform in order to be relevant still in the future, what would you keep of the old museum, and what would you abandon of the museums as we have known them until now, in order to be successful and be relevant in the future? what would you keep? What would you throw away?
This is the tricky question. In fact, we can answer this together. I think the basic functions of the museum are going to stay unless there are other institutions that or other bodies that can do this better than they do. So maybe a collaboration with the university might take some of the load from museums. Let's say, as far as documentation is concerned, for example. We may share things with other institutions, but I don't think we can really give up on anything particular. What do you think, Bartomeu?
Well, I have worked in very small, tiny institutions and in very, very big ones. I wouldn't, in the Museum of the Future, I would not miss bureaucracy. For instance, that is, it's a problem that it's common to most big organizations. So the bigger the museum is, the slowest and the probably the most energy is lost in that. But it is a tricky question to answer, of course, because at least myself, I don't dare. I'm sure I don't see the future, so it's something that probably we have to play by. We have to do it by trial and error. There isn't. I wouldn't dare to say that there is a successful preconceived idea, and we have to also be very attentive to see what different institutions are doing in different contexts, because every context is different, but all contexts are now affected by this pandemic that is actually an expression of the climate crisis and the climate emergency.
Yes.
So we are on the same boat.
Yes. But you are concerned with bureaucracy. I'm concerned with finances. I think, I hope museums are better financed by the state, the local government, the municipality, and of course by sponsors and so on. Other than that, I wouldn't change a single hair.
That's a good thing. I was the director of a museum in Barcelona when the crisis of 2008 that became progressive and became really unbearable by 2013. So the economy is certainly one of the big crises that we are all going to face, and museums are also going to suffer tremendously. I agree with you.
Yeah.
But I wish we had much more time. I'd like to thank you for sharing your ideas today with us. I hope that I can see you either digitally and especially in reality sometime soon. And I wish you all the health and the best with our gratitude. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Likewise. I wish you the same. Likewise. Thank you very much. This has been a nice conversation and hope to see you soon. Either way, virtually or physically.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too.